We are going to have the slides on SlideShare. So if you can't quite read everything, or if there are other issues, don't worry, you'll be able to review all the content much easier online.
So are we ready?
Go for it.
Okay. Yeah, so we're going to be talking about automating Drupal migration and how we were able to go from what was originally estimated as a 1 week downtime project to basically just a minute or two of downtime to switch to DNS. So my name is Dan Harris. I am the founder of webtrips.com, and I have 9 years of Drupal experience, back end, front end, every end. And I've been working on porting the node hierarchy module to Drupal 8, so that's one of the community things I'm working on. And I got called into NVIDIA several months ago, and they wanted to do this. They had made an attempt to do this migration, and they wanted some help, and it looked like a really interesting project. And I really enjoyed working with Ron. Very professional. It was just we had equal knowledge.
Well, my name is Heron. I'm a senior developer at NVIDIA for our developer website. So we do not the main site, but on the developer marketing for people that do games. We provide tools for people to make games. And I've been using developing Drupal sites for 9 years. I've been mostly involved in newspapers and radio and media companies. So this is one of my, I think it's my second project at NVIDIA, and it was pretty interesting. And we involved Dan, and that allowed us to move really fast with him because he's really knowledgeable about migrations. And I think we figured out a way to create some concepts about how to go about a migration of the site that we think can be really useful for everyone that's trying to do it on their own.
Yeah, so in fact, this is exactly what the slide is about, is that we're talking about a 6 to 7 migration tonight, but we feel like all the concepts can be applied to a 6 to 8 or 7 to 8 migration. And so, we also think that some of the things that we did maybe have never been done before. So we were kind of excited about some of these things that we did.
Okay. So where did we start at the beginning of this project? So we had the original site on Drupal 6, and after trying to migrate to Drupal 7, the original plan was to try to use SQL queries and scripts to move all the information from Drupal 6 to Drupal 7, and manipulating directly tables and creating all the scripts from scratch. So in order to do that, we will need about a week of downtime on the site. Maybe not a full downtime, like the site will not be available, but most of the functionality of the site will be disabled. One of the things that we do is that we ask developers to register for the site, and in order to have this executed, we will have to suspend registration for a week. So that's a pretty big thing that we do on the site. So that's it's a partial downtime, but it's still not acceptable, right? So at that point, we're trying to get SQL and trying to automate some of the portions of the migration with the migrate module into an existing Drupal 7 site. We tried to at the beginning, we tried to do a core upgrade and then try to go through the there are usual 5 to 6 upgrade process, trying to upgrade core, then try to upgrade modules, but that didn't work at all. So we built the Drupal 7 architecture on the side, and we were trying to move all the information in onto the Drupal 7. So that was the original. Now, after we upgraded our plan and tried to automate everything, the idea was to go all the way down to 0 downtime if possible. I think we pretty much did it in real time. The site was unavailable for about 2 minutes during the DNS cutoff, which we got some lessons out of it too. But we completed the migration in 1 business day. It was mostly automated. We didn't have to touch a lot of stuff. We just had to trigger all the scripts and and check. And after given a green signal from our stakeholders, go to the next stage. And one of the important parts of this is that the site was going to be rebuilt during the migration from scratch. So the thing is, in order to have repeatability and in order to have automation, we wanted to not move any craft over from the D6 side to the D7 side. So we started using install profiles and features in order to rebuild the site whenever the modules were enabled, and go from 0 to full site in a few minutes. And that's what we wanted to do. And I think you want to make some comments on it.
Well, I just wanted to drive home the point here that we were starting with nothing, empty database, and we were able to build the site up and do the migration, all within a short period of time. And one of the things that was unique for me in particular was, even though I did show up for the day of the migration, I didn't feel like I needed to be there. And so that was really strange, because normally I'm always nervous, but we had done this process so many times that we knew we were really confident.
Yeah, with having a full automated. Oh, so this is where we were before on the D6 site. We had like maybe 4 generations of developers on the same site. It was an old site, like about, I think it was going into its 7th birthday, and it was an old site, and about 3 teams of developers that have been involved in the site, and with no care for the architecture. So we had a lot of stuff that was just strange. We had a lot of custom modules, and we had a lot of contributing modules that added, duplicated functionality. And in one place we were using one module, and another one place we were using another module. So it was kind of messy. That is also about. Well, the other thing, we had about 1,000 privileged users, and those are like content owners and editors, and about 400,000 non-privileged users. Those are external users, and 25 content types, and a lot of pages, and a lot of nodes that were not given, were not being used anymore.
So for the Drupal 7 site, we were able to get the number of modules down, which was nice. Get rid of the cruft as kind of an ongoing theme. Keep cleaning things up. They were able to switch to Bootstrap as the primary theme, which, if you've ever worked with, is just a wonderful responsive theme, base theme, and then develop 4 sub-themes off of that, basically, and brought it all the way down to 6 content types, and then they had divided the the architecture up into 11 different features. And so those features were what was used to build the site from scratch. And so in order to help with the automation, we had the typical migrate modules. That's, I don't know if everyone's worked with like migrate D to D, but that's, I guess, now being built into Drupal 8 and migrate extras are pretty common with most migrations. Then we had this migrate web form one, which was really buggy. And then we had a couple import modules that were covering things that we weren't able to migrate, such as menu links and path redirects. And we wound up having 4 custom modules, which we'll talk about in a little bit. We had a script, or scripts, actually, multiple scripts, but we had one script that actually handled the migration. And we wound up putting together a really fast server in order to facilitate a faster migration. And so, about this script, well, it started out by creating a new Drupal 7 site, and then it added the architecture with the features, and we enabled modules that were required kind of throughout the process, and then had the migration in there, and then we had it like import anything that couldn't be migrated. And the key thing about this script, what it allowed us to do was get the migration exactly right, so that we could get all the dependencies worked out. We could keep kind of running the migration and then saying, okay, we're missing this piece of functionality or this piece of architecture. So that provided for a very repeatable, reliable process. Okay? And so basically, the 3 key commands that were in here were drush site install, to go ahead and install a site from scratch, drush enable for the features and modules, and drush migrate import command. Pretty much most of the commands in that script are actually drush written, so it's pretty awesome, the amount of support that drush gives to automate. And so we can just take get this. And I don't know, it's probably a little hard to see, but basically at the top we have all of our we have our site install, and then we have we're enabling over and over again with these features, and again, just all like had to be, we had to iterate through this to get this right, and then we started to we enabled some modules and then ran all these different migrations that I'll talk about in a little bit. And then we started using organic groups on the 7 site. It's not something that we have on the 6 site, so we kind of enabled those. And then there's probably some more migrations after that, and then we had to rebuild the permissions. As you can see, it's pretty much just all a bunch of drush commands. And we actually even use drush to do the menu imports and all that. So pretty cool what you can do with drush at the end of the day. So we wound up with 4 custom migration modules. One was to go ahead and disable edits on the Drupal 6 site. So what does that mean? Well, anywhere a user can go in and like populate a web form or log in and do an administrative task, kind of write to the database or add a new node. All those things were disabled and redirected to a page that just said, sorry, we're busy upgrading the site right now, basically. So we had a really small module to do that. We had a small module that was a view that was just being used for displaying the migration status. And then we had a module for the Drupal to Drupal implementation, and then one for the CSV implementation. And so Migrate and Migrate D2D and Migrate Extras handled most of the heavy lifting, probably did about 99% of what we were actually wound up migrating. But again, the menu links and path redirects were something that had to be imported. And I don't know if everyone's had a chance to actually start digging into Migrate D2D and the code and stuff. It's really neat, all the methods that they provide you to, before the migration starts, after, and on each row to actually manipulate the data as it's coming in, so you can get it exactly the way you want it, and clean it and everything else. So it's a great opportunity to, if you're unsatisfied with how the data is in the G6 site, it's also a great opportunity to cleanse that data.
I want to make a little comment on what some of the stuff that the Migrate didn't handle. It's not that it couldn't handle it. Well, except I think links and redirects. There were easier ways to do it without the importer. But for example, slideshows. I think this is a great example of the faster code is the one that doesn't exist. And one of the things we did is that we just skipped migrating slideshows because we had about 10, and editors wanted the opportunity to review them again. So instead of migrating them, we just asked the content owners to go look at the site, and if you need a slideshow, create it yourself. And you go in, edit it, and add it to the site yourself. And that really helped us because we will have had to handle a new content type in the migration. And sometimes it's just easier to ask people to take a look at it, and instead of doing it in code, just do it manually. Sometimes that's faster than, or even more convenient and more useful than trying to do everything automated. So that's also a balance that we need to be aware of. That some stuff is not worth migrating automatically. Some stuff is just it's worth to take a look at it and do it by hand.
We'll talk about this.
Yeah. So like Dan said, this is a big project. We had about 400,000 users, and we were changing the way we were giving access to or controlling the access for these users. Before we had a role-based registration process, so you'll get added to roles depending on we split the site in some level of programs, depending on what you want to do with your programs. So people will get added to certain roles. And in this new architecture, we were using organic groups. So we needed a way to map from roles into organic groups. And also organic groups have their own roles. So we needed to make sure that all the roles that were being assigned to the users in the new schema were correct. So we had to take care of that. The worst part was that the information contained was for the organic groups was not only on roles, but also what for submissions. So we had to create this whole information extraction from the D6 side about the user to be able to create a new state of information in the new site, and that was kind of interesting. One more thing about migration. Migration uses the core functionality of Drupal to create the objects on the database. So when migrates users, it uses a user save. But when you add a password to a user save, what Drupal does in the backend is that it hashes the string that you pass. But on the Drupal on the source of the data, original data, you're not getting the password, the original password. You're getting the hash for the password in the T6 site. So you pass that to the D7, and D7 is going to hash it again, effectively changing the password of the user to the hash in D6. So you had to fix that. And one of the things that this was created was that the passwords in both tables were different. So on every pass for the updates, whenever we wanted to migrate, lets you do only 1,000 users out of the 400K, and when you can say, well, just update this, don't recreate the record, just update the information. When it tries to compare it, the user password is different, so all of them need to be updated. So it gets confused and thinks that all of the users need to be updated. So this is one of the things that you need to be aware of. That when you're migrating users, you need to fix the passwords too. We writing directly to the user table, just setting the values correctly inside of the migration, but in a step after the actual creation of the user.
Yeah, so I'd probably add to this that one of the original plan was really to go ahead and migrate the existing database any old given day, right? We just pick a day, we're just going to do it, and that way we'll have 99% of the migration done, and then we'll come out on the day that we want to flip the switch, and we'll just do a marginal little migration, update whatever nodes need updating, add any new nodes, migrate this. Usually pretty good about figuring these things out, right? So, that was the plan, and then we got in, started to run it, and it was updating everything, at least all the users. It was working great for the nodes, but the users were getting updated again. And so we were scratching our heads going, why? So we think it's this password issue that was the cause of it, but can't really say for sure because there was a lot of little tweaks that we were making along the way.
And any one of those could have fixed it, right? Any
one of them, yeah, could have caused it. But another thing and this is something I've actually seen before with some of these larger, 400,000 is really not all that big compared to some sites that have millions of records. But when you actually kick the migrate process off, it actually seems to run out of resources. And it's almost like the database can't feed the code fast enough or something. We would monitor, and the database, percentage usage of the CPU would start to go up and up and up and up, and but the PHP would stay the same, or vice versa. I can't remember which one it was, but we were trying a lot of stuff. So it was important to be able to do the users all at once, all of a sudden. So that's why we did not do a incremental migration, in case you're wondering. So real quick, a little bit of code, just in case anybody's wondering. In order to differentiate unprivileged users versus privileged, all we had to do was check the the email, basically, setting, and if it had NVIDIA.com in it, then we knew it was a privileged user. And so we separated privileged from unprivileged. A lot of that had to do with early testing. We wanted to get testing done early and allow the privileged user to get in there and do stuff. And so we didn't want to have to migrate, 400 and 2,000 users, or 401,000. I guess there's about 1,000 privileged users. in order to just get out the ones that need to be able to do stuff. So that's why we separated the two. Very simple.
There's another reason that we wanted to have the privileged users, separated, and it's exactly that we didn't want to migrate all of them at once, but also we needed to have the users in order to have the content migrated, because the content is owned by these users. So we could not migrate the content until we have the author of the content. So that's something that you need to take care of before anything else. You need to move anyone that's going to own any kind of content needs to be in the database before you start moving your content, because it's going to be required for your content, for your notes.
Oh yeah, and this is how we had to go about fixing the password. Was set up a complete, which runs once, I guess, at the very end of each pass, and basically just grab the current password and then you know, put the right password that's supposed to be in there instead of winding up getting the hash password. So it's a little funky that we had to do this. I'm still not entirely certain why this was. I think it had to do with some configuration on the Drupal 6 site that wasn't normal, like an extra module that they had used or something along those lines. And this is part of the code where we're actually going in and assigning the users to the organic groups. Or at least this is the query that we had to add in order to do that. So basically, we're pulling in the information from the web form and web form submitted data tables, and then grabbing the fields we need, and then providing the IDs of whichever web forms we wanted, and then from there, then we take this information and call this custom function that is going to determine if they indeed should belong to that group or not. So
we have a bunch of interesting things here, because the web form data is on a stack table. We had to do a group concat for all the data here, and then try to separate the group concat data by commas and try to convert that into an object again later in the code. So that's why this was one of the biggest challenges, because getting the query right to extracting the data that you need out of the user, that proved to be pretty complicated because of the way the Drupal 6 site was architected. So all the data was scattered throughout all these tables in different formats. So that's why we have a couple of interesting things here in the actual query building of for this function.
yeah, and see if I can pop over. So after the query, then as we started to get into logic, it's really hard to see, right? But we started to get into the logic about where do these users actually belong. So we were calling this function a few different times, and again, that was just a separate function that we had to write, which basically here, and this was challenging because there wasn't anything out there to do this to kind of assign the users kind of in bulk to organic groups. At least not like on the back end. There actually were some things on the front end, but the user interface was really clunky. And then the expectation was going to fall on the actual content owners to do this. So we kind of came up with a way to actually do this using some of Organic Group's API calls. So
the other thing is that I use a front-end solution for this. It's not really good for this case because we wanted to automate this. One of the things that we wanted to do was to do this as many times as possible before launch day, because the more times you do it, the more things you can discover that can go wrong. And if you are going to your release without knowing what can go wrong and without knowing how long this is going to take you, it's very risky. So we wanted to make this as automated as possible. And automating the UI for this is going to be too hard. So we decided to just go with the scripted solution and create our own code for handling what we needed the code to handle, because there was no other solution for it. Okay. So well, we had a lot of interesting architecture for the site for V6, and some of that was that we had a lot of fields that were not being used, and a lot of those fields scattered through 25 or 26 content types, most of them empty, but they were changing the way the site behaved on that node. So a checkbox here that was added as a field was being used to show the sidebar on the node, and it's a field on the node, and stuff like that. And we also had something completely different that Dan's going to talk about. And one of the other things was that images and links would have absolute paths on content, and this was hard because that meant we could not test this transparently on a different URL or a different server than production. So if you had a link that goes directly to your site, but it's an absolute URL, if you move it to your local or to a testing server, you run a link checker, let's say, that link is going to always find it, but you don't know if you actually move that piece of content. So we needed a way to convert all those absolute URLs into relative paths and try to move images into the relative path to make sure that all the files were there and make sure. So when we switch the sites and the actual domain changes to one side to the other, and if that file is not there, before it was there because it was being served by the old site. But if you move it or you switch DNSs and the file's not there, you're going to get 404. So that's why we wanted to do that. And one other thing that we did was that we moved a lot of files to a separate cloud storage. And instead of handling it inside of Drupal, we just moved it out and created redirects for it. And that was also a challenge because we needed to know which files we needed to move them, and have some kind of record to know which files were being needed or redirected. So those were like the big challenges. And also simplifying the number of content types. 25 content types. It's very complicated site to use. So if you want, if a new editor goes in and tries to do something, he's probably going to click on the wrong content type, even if it's something that he was instructed to do. Sometimes we had a lot of errors where behavior changed with one content type or the other, but the fields were the same. And just depending on which content type you choose when you created it, it had a completely different behavior, and you could not convert from one into the other, and most of the features were not being used. So reducing the number of content types and trying to get an architecture that made sense and unify all the fields and all the content types and translating from the old architecture to the new one, that was also that was also a challenge.
Yeah, and I would just add that for the body, the images that were inside these text areas, you know, they wanted to, well, you know, when you go to test that, obviously, it's like the content person that's going to review that is going to freak out if he doesn't see his images, right? So it was really causing just a lot of headache early on to have all these images missing that, you know, should have been there. So it was kind of a fun little problem to solve. So how we went about solving it was, as we brought this field in to the migration, we had to go into it and parse it using simple HTML DOM parser. I don't know if anybody's ever used it, but it's a nice little way to work your way around a chunk of HTML and grab things from it, collect them. So it's perfect for our resources. So let me okay, yeah. So apologies again for the size, but basically, you know, at the top we're basically adding the parser, and then we're bringing in this case, the body, but any text area we should work on. And then we're telling it to go ahead and find all the images in this body. And then every time I find it, I'm going to replace my absolute URL with just slash, basically. And so that's all that code, basically a bunch of lines of code just to do all that. So, and then basically, whatever, then at the end, we just basically replace it with what we came up with. So, nice little tool. We never used the HTML DOM parser. And then this is another fun thing. So when the site is, how old did you say the Drupal 6 site was? 6 years?
I think it was
Almost 7 years old. A number of developers working on it over that time. You know, CCK kind of was all over the place as a module. It caused some issues during the migration, and one of these issues was that somebody decided that there's this thing they call a product page, and somebody decided that the image that was going to be associated was going to be used in two different ways, at least on the Drupal 6 site. And so what they did was, for some unknown reason, decided to create a hook form alter, add a tab to the node edit / whatever page that is like advanced or something like that. And then you go click on that tab and you select that you don't want it to be shown on with the product page.
The thing is that node had a required image field that you were, of course, required to fill up. But most of the time, people didn't want to use it. And they had to go into a separate tab and check a checkbox to hide it, right?
Which, this is where it gets even more funny, is they decided to go ahead and use the variables table to store information about whether that checkbox was checked or not. So tracking this all down was the first fun part, right? And then now it's like, okay, well, if this checkbox is checked, we don't even want to bring the image over during the migration process. So
Because if people checked it, they're not using the image. So we don't want to bring in graft. We don't want to bring in that file that is not being used. And we don't want to fill that up in the new site. So figuring out that this checkbox was checked, and then removing the file from the field association and migration. That's
Yeah, so basically, we had to, by the way, if you've never used Drush Printar before, it's a very, very handy tool for debugging, things like a migration where you need to kind of get some output, but where's it going to go? So how do you do that? You use Drush Printar in a very similar way that you would use the valves like BSM or whatever to get information just quickly about the stuff that's actually coming out of Drush. So I use that a lot while I was doing this. And so basically, we go into the Drupal 6 site, we grab the variables table, and then we basically match whenever this long, name that this naming convention that they came up with to populate the variables table, we match it, and then basically if it has, I finally determined that if it's I:1, that means the checkbox is checked. So pretty obvious, right? So if that was the case, then we just say we don't want the image and we skip past it. So, and then empty text areas were causing display problems on the site. So we wanted to just go ahead and get rid of those real quick. And this sounded like such an easy thing. And there was posts on Stack Exchange and Drupal.org, and there was at least 3 or 4 different posts on how to do this, and none of them worked. And so finally, I figured something out that finally worked. So in case anybody ever comes across that issue, that's one way you can solve it. And so that kind of covers the Drupal to Drupal migration stuff that we did. But then there was this idea of the non-standard entities. And so what we mean by that is, well, Drupal to Drupal migrations, it handles pretty well the well-established Drupal entities, nodes, taxonomies, users, things like that. But what if you have what are blocks on the Drupal 6 site that you now want to turn into entities using the Entity API and UI on the Drupal 7 site? Well, Migrate can pretty much handle just about anything you can think of as a source, and populate the database, the Drupal 7 database, as the destination. So basically decided that CSVs was going to be the way to do this. So I was going to do a code thing here, but considering the problems, seeing it, I'm not sure if it's going to be that much value. But basically, we set up a CSV to Drupal 7 migration, and then we had the content editors, create the exact content to populate those basically with slides and slideshows. So they had a number of slides. Those slides were used throughout various slideshows and often reused. And so that's why they went with an entity on Drupal 7. And it was just a matter of creating the CSV and giving it proper image location for the slide, which we had as all part of the temporary file. So
this also served as fixtures for testing. Whenever because we wanted to test that slideshows work, even if we were not migrating them from the D6 site, we wanted to make sure that they work correctly. So we needed to create some of those slideshows before running our tests. So using CSV migration, just read the CSV for any slideshows that you want. Those are fixtures, so you can just go in your tests and just make sure that the text is exactly the same in the exact div or element, right? And and that's it. That you're done. And it also helped that editors could edit those existing slideshows, so it will help them to create their own once we were getting closer to launch. So that's I think that's a pretty good idea to use the CSV migration as a source because it serves a lot of purposes, and we use that a couple more times, right?
Well, yeah, I think the thing of it is that if it's part of the migration process or at least part of something that we can run with Thrush, then it can be automated and then it can be immediately tested, right? So that was one of the other reasons why we were looking to do this. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, we were talking like 10 different pages or 10 different slideshows or something like that. It wasn't all that many. It wasn't like it was going to take a content editor more than an hour or half an hour or whatever to go in and do that. But that was a half an hour to an hour every time we wanted to test it. Every time we wanted to change something. So we thought, why not? This is just one more thing we can automate. So that's what we wanted to do.
Oh, okay. So for the actual migration run, at the beginning of this talk, we were saying that we went from like about a week to a few minutes, and so we wanted to reduce the time that we were going to be out of the functionality site. And originally, the estimation for the migration of the users for 100K users was about 40 hours. So the problem is that you can leave that running, just leave it running and come back tomorrow or in 2 days, right? But the thing is, migration is really memory intensive. So it ends up running out of memory and it ends up running out of resources at some point. And we need a way to make it faster, make it more manageable, and measure. Well, when we started measuring how long this was going to take, we were back at 1 week of work for the migration. So we eventually reduced it to about 3 hours for the actual running it. The full exercise for the migration was more like about 6 hours. And in the end, but our testing was about this. So we did a lot of configuration on the server because we need a special MySQL configuration, special PHP configuration, special Drush configuration to be able to speed migration. So we've got a really fast server with a bunch of cores, a bunch of RAM and an SSD that really helped to make sure that the bottleneck was not on the code.
Yeah, and another thing that made this migration unique versus all the other ones I've ever done is that I probably spent 30% of the time on this project just working on the server to try and improve the speed. Tweaking my .cnf, tweaking php.ini, testing, looking for where the bottleneck was. Always kept coming back and scratching my head. So we wound up doing something at the end which was pretty cool, which is taking advantage of multi-threading technology within a CPU. And as it turns out, you'd almost think that PHP, 5 that whatever we were using was supposed to handle threading, by itself, so you didn't even think about it at first. But it turns out that the kind of batch way that Migrate handles things is just not necessarily built for multi-threading. But we found a way to do it. I'm going to talk about that a little later.
The other of the challenges that we found was that getting the order right for installing your features and your dependencies is really important because sometimes you're going to end up, especially with features, you can build them up in the UI. Sometimes you end up adding circular dependencies and unintendedly. And you need to be very aware of that when you're building your architecture and your features, that you don't do that and that you're enabling your features and your modules in the right order. Sometimes one of the things that we found was that if you try to enable a lot of modules on one go, uh, they kind of go into a race condition and they try to finish one before the other and they don't find each other and some of the hooks don't run correctly. I'm talking about trying to enable the whole site, the whole list of modules, like 100 modules in one go, and that doesn't work. So getting the order right was important. The other one was the relationships between content. If you need to create a relationship between two pieces of content, both pieces need to exist. So which one do you create first? And that's one of the reasons we ended up separating user migration in privileged and unprivileged users, because we found out that one of the pieces that we were missing when trying to move the content was that it didn't have an author. And we didn't have an author because we didn't have a user. So we had to find a way to move all the required users there before the content and not wait for 400 K to be done before. So that's also what you need to be aware of. And also, we added since we added some fixtures using the CSV migration, and some of the content was now in a different architecture, was going to live in a different hierarchical structure. So we added parent nodes that needed to exist, and getting that right, importing those from the CSV before you import that from the original source. That's also important. So you need to figure out what the right order is, and just try to keep to it. And this is why automating and creating the script is important, because this way you don't forget about the big details. Did I enable views before or after this module? You have to remember that. You just add it to the script, make it work in the script, and you can just run it 1,000 times, and those little details about which one needs to go first just don't bother you anymore.
Yeah, I would just add one more point to this. Is they were trying to, again, not only migrate, but they were also trying to clean up the architecture of the Drupal 7 site. And so by having the entire site built from scratch using features, we had that, other Git code and everything else. And, as you know, when you introduce like a new module that maybe you're just testing with, and all of a sudden it changes all your field weights or something. So, that is like, so we could like see that instantly when we were going through this, and we could be very careful about how the features were updated. So only, again, not introduce anything that we didn't want. If that new module is causing problems, go back and disable it and then rebuild that feature. And so we were able to get the features exactly the way we wanted them by using this kind of combination of Git and features.
Okay, so this is how we ended up doing it. We decided that a week before our release, we went to something we call content freeze, when we asked all of our editors to stop creating content, stop creating editing their stuff, because we wanted to have a known good set of content that we could compare to. And this took about a week, 2 days before the release. We did the automated reveal, the one we were talking about, from zero database to use the features, move the content, move the privileged users, and have a working site and ready to go. And after that, editors could go into the site and start creating their slideshows, or if they wanted to do any changes to the content after it had been migrated, they could do so. So that all those changes were going to go live the moment we switch sites. So we gave them 2 days to do that, and on the release day, we early morning in the on that day, we went into lockdown for the registrations. We chose a time where our registrations are low, and usually during the night there's no registrations. So we chosen a time to do that. We locked it down, and we started the full migration process for the 100,000 users. And it took about 6 hours in the end, with all the moving databases back and forth, moving all the files back and forth, and uploading everything to the host, to the final host. And then 2 hours before release, we just let the editors loose on the site and let them work on their users if they wanted to. One of the things that they wanted to do was to reassign permissions and access controls to the content. So we let them do that during the last 2 hours of the migration, and at this point the site was already migrated. So we were just letting them, look at it, configure it in any way they needed their content to be, and just wait for their final approval. And after this, we just switch DNS from one server to the other. That was it.
And are you going to talk about what methods and tools you use to help the editors figure out if the two sites are the same now, or are we going to do that later?
Like what? Like the
Name checkers and all those other.
the what?
Name checker.
Oh yeah, we had one of the things that we used was a link checker. So we were running link checkers against the rebuilt versions of the site, and we did this again on the production side, or the soon to be production site, and in order to just find out if we were missing any links, any files that were not there. And because we already have moved the absolute URLs into relative URLs during the migration, we were really making sure that we already had moved everything over. And during the link checker helped with that. One of the other things that we added that Dan worked really hard on was some views, bulk operations views, to review the status of all the content. So the editors could very, very fast filter and modify in bulk any content that they needed to work on. And if they were missing a tag, they were missing something, anything that could be that was not migrated, for example, because we rebuilt the whole architecture for the content types. Some of the information that was there, 26 content types and a bunch of fields, some of that information didn't make it over. So if there was anything else that they needed to do, operations, we usually added alternatives to do it, and we let them do that in batch. So accelerating the migration. This was really interesting. Migrate provides a UI for doing the migration, but it's really slow. It uses batch operations for Drupal, and it's not that it's useful if you want to do a few hundred things, but for the bulk we're talking about, it's not very good. So we wanted to use Drush to do it. The other thing that we learned about migration was that once you load an object from the source database, you really want to be finished with it before you move on to the next one. Because migrate objects are really, really big, really heavy, and they have a lot of inheritances, and there's a lot of classes, there's a lot of overhead for running a migration object. So once you grab a piece of data, you don't let go of it until you're finished with it. And well, that was the main lesson there. And the other thing that we learned about was multi-threading. So multi-threading in migration is really weird because migrate, what it does is that it only allows for one process to be running at a time for the migration because it uses an index table. And if you have two processes running against the same index, it can run into problems because it doesn't have actual race condition controls or anything. So it just tries to go direct into the batch of business processing. So there's very interesting link about how to add multi-threading capabilities to migration, and based on that, the way we were able to add multi-threading capabilities to migrate module and really accelerate the stuff that we're going to see how that ended up working. So the some comments about doing multi-threading. It's not very portable. You need to add a Drush extension, and you need to have a fast server. Because if you run low on cores to it, or you're not gonna get anything out of it. If you don't have, you're running multiple processes on it, you're not gonna have a lot of time to dedicate to the migration. So I will say you need to be very careful about the whole environment where you run this. Drush extensions, fast server, but on the other side, on the other hand, it's very, very effective. It's really made a difference once we started working. So this is pretty much the way we did it, the technique for adding multi-threading to migration. So you subclass the migration in order to get some preparations on top of the existing migration that you have. So you have to have a working migration class, like we had for users. We already have a working migration that if we run it, it will work, but it will take 40 hours. So in order to add multi-threading capabilities to it, we need to subclass it. So we add this subclass, and we modify that class to make it use a very specific index for that migration. So what we're going to do is that we're going to create multiple subclasses of that migration and run them at the same time, pointing to the same index. And each one of those migrations or subclasses of the migration is going to work on only a chunk of the full work or the full list of it that we need to work on. So we need to add also support on this subclass for making it just take the information it needs out of the database and just work on that. So this is pretty much boilerplate data for D2D. You need, of course, a source connection, source version, and I found out that you needed to have the format mappings. So for the input filters, the 87, and I had to add it. So instead of loading it from somewhere else, I just hard coded it because we were going to run it once, and that's it. So it was just faster to do it like that. And just a description, just added any string that just to kind of describe what we were trying to do. And at the relationship to the roles migration that Randy expects. Like you can see there that I'm adding a multi-threaded class that extends the existing migration that we had. So that's what we were talking about. So once you have all your required parameters for E2D and migration, you call the parent constructor class, and you're going to use the same index table for all your subclass migrations. The way the Drush extension works is that it generates new migrations with different names, actually random names or timestamp names, and then runs them so that they can run at the same time, and then deletes them. And that's what the Drush extension does. So in order to have them all use the same table for the index, we have to hardcode it or somehow set it in a way that's going to be the same for every one of those clones or dynamically generated copies of that migration. And we have just the index definition. We were using UID for the index, so we were just tracking UID to UID of the index. So that was all. That's what we needed to do. And finally, we needed to add support for the query to just get the data I needed and just work on those items. So we just pull the parent query and just add a range to it, and that's it. We don't have to do anything else than that. The way the Drush extension works is that in addition to creating these dynamically generated clones of the original migration, what it does is that it controls the stack of things to do. And if you tell it to do 50,000 items, 10,000 per thread, it's going to break off the chunks, and it's going to control which migration gets the argument for where to start, where to end. So these migrations are going to get that information as an argument. So you need to handle the argument and be able to just get that, to use that for your query so you get all the information. So after we did this, this is pretty much boilerplate code. We could probably extend any other class on the migration, and the same code will apply. So I think that's a pretty good thing. That it's that part, adding the multi-threading is pretty portable on its own. You can just point it to different classes, and it's going to keep working. You'll need to change, of course, the class it extends and the index that it's using, and that'll be it. So for measuring the improvement, we did tests on the same server. We were restoring the database, the target database from a backup. So what we'll do is that we'll rebuild the whole site, and for running we'll back it up, and then run the migration, and then drop that and go back to the state where it was before running the migration, and run it again with different parameters all the time. And one of the things that I think made us not go all that fast was that both databases were on the same server that was running the migration. I think it's good enough, but I think we will have had more performance gains if we separated one server for one database, one server for another database, and one server for running the actual. And we had to do some MySQL optimization for currency issues that happen when you're, just dumping a lot of data in there, especially in the way that Drupal handles it. So, please. So this is a comparison of how well it did on tests. For 1,000 items, 100 items per thread, these were the results. I only went up to 3 because, well, 1,000 and then 100 per thread was pretty boring. So I just went on to the next one. And I tried 10,000 items, 1,000 per thread. So this was really good actually. Can you go back one? So for one thread, we're seeing about 800 and something per minute. And we can see about the same speed on I'm just adding adding more items to the queue. But we can see that it really speed up on three threads, in 4 threads, and that's really good. And I stopped after 5 because the speed actually reduced after 5. I think that's where the having all the databases in the same server hit us, because some cores or some cycles need to be spared for actually going to database. So after 5, we're kind of hitting the capacity of the server. We're doing both database readings, writings, and running data. And if you go to the last one, this is actually running 50,000 items, 5,000 per thread. This was actually way more useful. And if you can see that about 5 threads was good enough for us. We'll run a server with I think 8 cores, and that's where we got the maximum speed. And after 5, you start slowing down again because you're hitting the database too fast, and you're not giving enough CPU to the database to maybe separating the servers will give us much better results.
Actually, a couple things I would add is just keep in mind that this was all being done on an Intel Xeon, very expensive Xeon processor, a lot of cores, lots of threads per core. So don't know how that would compare to whatever you have access to. But if you're able to do something with Intel Xeon in particular, it's a huge jump from whatever the next line, the i7 or whatever the next line down is on Intel. It is a massive, massive jump, but it's also a massive, massive price increase too. So there doesn't seem to be any kind of in between on the processor market. And Drush does other things in batch, and they do kind of use similar processes that Migrate does. So I would say that this multi-threading idea wouldn't necessarily only apply to migration. You could apply it to other areas whenever you need to update a lot of data at once, and you're able to do that with Drush. Then why not try and take advantage of the multi-threading capabilities we have done.
Especially once we've seen that it's not really that difficult to add multi-threading to the Drush commands. Actually, on the website that I was referring to, there is another post about adding creating Drush commands that have multi-threading in the same way that it's being done for the migration. And actually, that Drush plugin provided us with the multi-thread migration code, so to handle the cloning and dynamically calling the migrations with the right parameters for breaking up the release in small chunks. So it's all provided for you somewhere. Just putting it all together is kind of hard. There's not a lot of complete information on how to do a migration, and we are hoping that this gives you guys a more full image of what needs to be done for full migration. So some of the things that we learned: if you drop your DNSTTL to 1 minute a couple days before you do release, when you switch your DNS, it's going to pick it up pretty much immediately, and you're not going to have mostly any downtime. And after you release, you can bump up your TTL back to the same level, the same value, right? The other thing that we learned is that repeatability is the key here. If you do something so many times, you'll get to know the process, and you get to know all the places where you can fail, and all the places where you can be improved. And knowing it's going to, doing it a lot of times, it's going to reduce your risk. So if you do something a lot of times, you practice your release a lot of times, it's going to be, it's going to help a lot in having a perfect release. And something else?
I think you pretty well nailed it. I think we have one more.
Yeah, we have one more. Oh yeah. Asking for help. Yes, ask for help. Sometimes you just get into the code, and you get into a mood where you are just trying to solve a problem, and just looking around and say, "Hey, can you help me with this?" Sometimes you find out that you don't need to do that at all. You can drop, the approach you were having, you were going, and just do something different, which is something that, especially with migration, we did a lot, right? We thought that one approach was right, and it turned out that it wasn't right for this one. So you need to combine approaches, especially with this migration, because there's so many ways that migration can be used. So just trying it around, turning around, and asking for help. It's what's going to get you going on finding a solution for you.
Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it. And I would just say, just to bring it all back together and kind of summarize what made this unique, was all the things that got combined into one. The multi-threading of the Drush command, or the whole migration process, or the user migration process, I should say, and the automation that went into this, the building the site from scratch, and then kind of the site had more weird problems than probably any other one that I can remember, at least one for a long time. So, it was definitely a very, very interesting project, huge learning experience.
And a pleasure.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. So I think that's.
Oh yeah. Just one more thing about the orphan fields. Yeah, we have somehow a field that was still appearing on our schema for one of the content types in 6 that was actually removed, but somehow was not removed from the tables. So it was still showing up in the registry, and migration tried to pick it up, and the tables were not there anymore. So it was just trying to read that data from those tables that didn't exist, so and it was breaking, and it took a while to figure that out, and that we almost didn't use migration because we were getting this weird error that we couldn't figure out what's going on. But once we figured it out, we said, well, this makes sense, right? Just some bad data that we have on the original source. So just be careful with that. Sometimes fields in Drupal 6 are probably not going to be that well handled, and migration can choke on those. So just be careful with that.
Yeah, it was especially weird since we were specifically telling Migrate, don't look at this, don't even ignore this field. We don't want it. We're not going to use it. But somehow we're still trying to pick it up. It's just like the only thing I can think is again how CCK module kind of evolved over time and the way it was being used and different modules being used different ways. And tables would wind up in either the CCK tables themselves or in their own module tables. And so it was kind of all over the place. And somehow this one extra field just didn't get deleted properly. Maybe the website glitched right at that moment and they were doing the deletion and maybe threw an error, but nobody noticed, who knows. But it was killing us for like a week. So yeah, fun times. So I would like to open up to questions. Still have a good 25 minutes. Ask some questions.
Do you need to worry about the marking input? Is that the side just only showing the side?
Excuse me?
Is that different languages on the side that you need to worry?
No, not this time. We are only using English. We're not even using translator, and we're just using the default translate language. And we didn't Dutch translation.
But Migrate is supposed to be able to handle languages. It's just Drupal 7. There's so many different ways, to do multiple languages. You want to do them at the field level or as entire, as a node as a whole, and so on and so forth. So I could see there being challenges if you had to include language for sure. Any other questions?
Comments?
So, are you running the database and Drupal on separate hosts or separate hosts?
No, right now we're running it on separate hosts. For the migration, we only had one big server, so we dropped it.
Running everything.
Yeah, but the thing is, we're hosted on Pantheon, so we can't run migration on Pantheon because we can run shells, right? We can SSH it. So we have to do it outside or locally somehow, and then move the database from order. So that's why it took a little bit longer than it will have, because we needed to download everything, do the migration, and upload again everything, the result inside, and moving it there, and then having the editors, do their stuff, and then if there's a second comment phrase, download it again, run the second migration, upload it again. So that was kind of adding a little bit of overhead. No, we're not running. We're running.
So the new one, the Drupal 7 is like samples.
Drupal 7 is on Pantheon.
Yeah, they were both on Pantheon, Drupal 6 and 7.
They were both.
And you can tell Migrate that the source and the destination are remote. Migrate doesn't really care where the source and the destination are physically, but when they're not local, you usually have to add some more. Pantheon has all kinds of connection, restrictions and requirements that you have to add to the connection. So I was actually able to successfully do it, but like you said, we had other limitations that prevented us from really successfully doing like a Pantheon to Pantheon, migration just on the fly.
Which was what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
The other thing is that this is a really intensive, CPU intensive thing, and I think we'll have gotten that if we were doing this migration, 2 or 3 times a day, running a super intensive, CPU intensive process 2 or 3 times a day for a few months, then we will have probably have trouble.
if you end this drive, I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
and it was also easier for us to customize the server because we had it. So adding custom MySQL configuration and custom PHP configuration, installing Drush extensions that we have that server, so we do it whatever we want to do. That's why we decided to host it, for the migration on the same host. For production, we are.
yeah, it's a good point because Pantheon and any other host is going to be having their database optimized probably more for mostly reads and a few writes. And we need a lot of writes and a lot of reads, almost like 50-50. So, being able to tweak all that and tweak all these different configurations, like we said, MyCNF, PHP.ini, Drush.ini. Some of those you might be able to do on a remote server. Probably, I don't know if I've ever seen one that's going to allow you to do my.cnf. But at least with PHP.ini, if you're running like a CGI bin kind of thing, maybe you can get your own version or something. So it's definitely not ideal to try and do it, but it is possible.
One final comment. The actual final migration that we did, we got a newer server. We got a different server with 2 Xeon processors for running the actual migration that we got. We loaned that for a couple of weeks, and from someone else in the company, and we just got that and used it for the actual migration. That's why it also went all the way down. We use different numbers for the threads and for the migration queue that you were seeing on the tables here. But that's the kind of speed improvement with the one processor and running everything all together in one place. You will see at least 3 or around 3 times the speed.
Questions? Well, thanks, and those are our emails. You need to get a hold of us. Please think of questions after next week or something. By all means, feel free to email us any questions.
All right. Thank you both so much. That was a great presentation. I was impressed by how thoroughly you covered such a large project and hitting all the great points in terms of what it takes to overcome the bureaucracy in the sense of having to deal with a big production site that's suddenly going to be a new production site, and nobody wants it to go down at all. But,
Yep.
Doing it on the fly, that's a trick.
Yeah, it is.
That's great.
It is tricky. We almost got it. We did get an alert for a minute. Almost got it.
Well, that's still amazing. I mean, bigger conversions than that usually never happen
Yeah.
at all. I mean, they don't even think about it. They're too risk averse for it. So
Yeah.
great work. Congratulations.
Yes, I mean, they were, with a week downtime, they were looking at losing 1,000 customers, that
Yeah.
would have come in.
At least.
Because that's about how many they average a week. And then not only that, but you're upsetting all the people that are already existing and want to go in and download their development kit or whatever it is that they're trying to get at. So you're also risking alienating existing customers.
One more fun detail. We didn't re-enable the G6 site after edits and registering and logging in to the site after we did the cutoff because it was not needed anymore, and the site's there. And I think I needed to check something. That's why I re-enabled logins on the D6 site. But after the cutoff, nobody noticed, and unfortunately, that's the sign of job well done, that nobody noticed it, right?
That's right.
So
Well, just for your information, the slides will be on SlideShare, and there's a video that'll be on YouTube. And so if you have any follow-ups or questions, It'll all be posted on the Meetup site. Great. Well, thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. Once again, Daniel, I appreciate